this is one of New Zealand's darkest days. Clearly, what has happened here is an extraordinary and unprecedented act of violence.
Straight to our Fox News alert, 49 people are dead after gunfire erupts inside 2 mosques.
Moments ago, President Trump tweeted his condolences. In part, he wrote, "My warmest sympathy and best wishes go out to the people of New Zealand after the horrible massacre. The U.S. stands by New Zealand for anything we can do. God bless all."
And with that, let's go out to Kitty Logan, who's also following the story in London with the breaking developments. Kitty.
Yes, good morning, guys. Well, these shootings happened at 2 separate mosques in the city of Christchurch, that's on the southern island of New Zealand. And New Zealand police say that these attacks were well planned. Now, the gunfire started up at around 1:45 p.m. local time. That's a time when the mosques are busy with people attending Friday prayers. 41 people died in the first mosque, which was attacked. One witness there described the scene.
I was hearing that shooting after shooting after shooting. It went on about 6 minutes or more, and I could hear screaming and crying, and I saw some people were, drop dead.
Police also found 2 bombs fixed to a car which didn't go off. They detained 4 suspects immediately after the shootings as well. One man in his late 20s has already been charged with murder. Authorities have not named this suspect, but an Australian man is being linked to the attack. He also posted a lengthy anti-immigration manifesto in which he claimed responsibility. A graphic video of the attack was also posted online. Facebook later removed it. Police say none of these suspects were on any kind of terror watch list. Now, at least 20 people were also injured in these attacks. They were rushed to hospitals for emergency treatment. Police have cordoned off the area surrounding the mosques. They've urged people to stay indoors for now. Of course, it's night time in New Zealand, and in darkness the city remains on lockdown. And these shootings have, of course, met with international condemnation. President Trump, as you say, says the US stands by New Zealand after what he described as horrible massacres. And the White House has added a statement. The United States strongly condemns the attack in Christchurch. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. We stand in solidarity with the people of New Zealand and their government against this vicious act of hate. And now New Zealand is on high alert, although police have reassured the public that they don't believe that there is a further attack planned. But certainly this comes as a shock for a very quiet and normally peaceful nation. Back to you guys.
Yeah, they're not used to this. Thank you so much, Kitty. Let's bring in Geraldo Rivera, Fox News correspondent at large. Geraldo, when you heard this news last night, what was your reaction?
I guess my first reaction, Allison, was to feel very much like I felt on the day of the Tree of Life massacre, the synagogue last year, October, and to feel the way I felt in the Sutherland Springs Church massacre the year before that. These are sitting ducks. These are people who are praying. They are targets that have no defense. There are more murders in those 2 mosques in New Zealand this morning than there are in New Zealand over the course of an entire year. The manifesto seems to indicate that this was this particular crazy mass murdering fiend was motivated by the immigration crisis. He said that he's a white nationalist, a 28-year-old Australian white nationalist. Immigration is as hot an issue there as it is here or in Great Britain. It was one of those things. There are multiple perpetrators, apparently, if those reports are true. IEDs attached to the perpetrators' vehicles. Right. This was a butcher out to get a butcher's bill, and if indeed there were 3 or 4 perpetrators, this is a very, very serious attack. Right. If they are all white nationalists, that's an escalation of the violence that is horrifying. It's just a nerve chill.
Well, 4 have been arrested. One man, a guy in his 20s, an Australian, has been charged with murder. But Geraldo, what does it say about him or our culture that not only would he kill all these people, where he walked into the first place and there were hundreds waiting. He said there wasn't even any time to aim. There were just so many targets. He didn't just kill the people. He had to do it on social media. And so he apparently had a GoPro on his helmet, and he walked in, and he live streamed apparently on Facebook for 17 minutes. Why was that?
Well, you know, there is this self-exaltation, this look at me, look what I'm doing. You know, this they're so nutty. They're so beyond the pale of human experience. They are people who see human life as just like a set piece, like scenery for their social media. In this case, live streaming 17 minutes. I wonder what took 17 minutes for the New Zealand cops, who are often unarmed, by the way, to respond to this scene.
So is the whole population.
I always go back to the I would never have people in one place like that vulnerable without somebody with a gun to protect them. They are too vulnerable. In this case, white genocide, he invokes, immigration killing us. President Trump is a symbol of renewal of white identity. All sick stuff that I'm so glad the president and the White House have so strongly condemned him. These people they're the spit on the bottom of your shoe. These are horrible, horrible people that would invoke any cause to perpetrate these massacres that have no place in the human existence. It's chilling to wake up to something like that.
And we're going to talk to Ambassador Scott Brown in just a moment about that in a short time. But just to move over to a major scandal here in America, and that is this college admission scandal. And now we're beginning to see some of the fallout. Lori Loughlin is not only in trouble legally, she has now lost her job at Hallmark. Her two daughters, Olivia Jade as well as Isabella Rose, have left USC. What is your reaction to this scandal and now the lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against the colleges for inadequately screening admissions?
First, let me apologize to Ainsley for calling her Allison.
It's okay.
That's a function of the fact that I've been so traumatized this morning by all this awful news. Listen, I think that rich people have, you know, in a very arrogant way, been promoting their children. There's nothing wrong with that, generally speaking. But this is where the really wealthy go beyond just promoting their children and giving them a leg up. This is where you game the system, where you cheat the system, where you buy off coaches to say the child plays a sport the child does not play. It is a perversion, a criminality, a humiliation for the children. If the children are complicit, their lives are wrecked, their lives are ruined. They go on from here, they'll be marred by this forever.
Hey, Geraldo, speaking of the children.
But it also is
Speaking of the children, what should happen to the children? Should they be thrown out of colleges? Because apparently a majority of them did not know what their parents were up to.
Well, I think that's a case-by-case basis. You've got to see what the kids knew and when they knew it. Were they minors at the time their parents perpetrated these gigantic hoaxes, these frauds? Is it probable? Is it likely that they had no idea what was happening? If, as the prosecutors indicate, there were cases where proctors sat alongside the child and took the SAT or the ACT for the child or corrected their answers during the test, then it's hard to believe the children didn't know what was going on.
If your parents steal a car and give it to you, and then they find out your parents stole a car, you can't keep the car. They got to get kicked out. These two expelled themselves, but there's no way those kids who got there under false auspices get to stay.
Well, I think about a couple of things. One, I think about if they're really, really wealthy and they just donate a gym for $10 million, then their kid walks in as a legacy.
The old-fashioned way.
Level.
But now with a 70 average, they don't. I mean, it depends on,
well,
if you're close,
maybe
that
with a 70, if the gym is big enough, maybe. I'm not so sure about that. I also think about all the negative attention, affirmative action has been given to people given a leg up because of, being from a racial minority. And I think that how unfair they have been pilloried by critics who say they snuck their way into college because of race. They don't deserve to be here. When you look at these privileged kids from the coasts whose parents are well known to us, who are celebrated, who have, who thought that it was okay to get into an elite college by committing a crime, it kind of pales in comparison. It really is something that undermines your faith. I understand why these Stanford University kids have filed these class action lawsuits against the perpetrators, against the defendants in this massive civil federal probe, because they have devalued the worth of their diploma. They have made their efforts subject to ridicule. They have undermined, people work so hard. My dad begged me to get an education. He said, go to school. He was the first one one of 17 to graduate high school. I was the first one in my entire generation of all my cousins to go to college. You can get a leg up. College is the great equalizer. But when you see how college becomes nothing more than a scam, just like other scams, it's so disheartening. It's so embarrassing. They'll wear this black mark forever. I think that this is, but this, I also believe that, like the very, very obviously different events, but like what happened in New Zealand, this is just the harbinger of more to come. This is the beginning. Now it's 50 families. There'll be 500. There'll be 5,000 before this is over.
I agree.
Well, and I guarantee colleges are changing the way they do this. They might have committees that have to decide so that one person's not being bought off. Thank you so much, Geraldo. Good to see you, and have a great weekend.
I love you, Ainsley.
Love you too.
All
Bye.
right. 11 minutes after the hour, Jillian Milley, I'm sure he feels just as strongly about you.
I'm sure he does. Let's start off with this Fox News alert right now. An urgent manhunt is intensifying for a gunman who shot a cop in Montana. Police say the suspect is carrying an AR-15 and opened fire while the officer was investigating another shooting. The officer is currently in critical condition. To another Fox News alert, a rocket attack on Tel Aviv may have been a mistake. Israeli media quoting defense sources saying the rockets may have been fired during routine maintenance. Overnight, Israel retaliating with 100 airstrikes on terror sites in Gaza. The Israelis targeting several Hamas sites, including its headquarters and where they store weapons. A top general now warning Google is indirectly helping the Chinese military. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo telling Brian in an exclusive interview the threat of the country is very real.
We need global companies to come to the realization of the threat that China presents. Certainly American companies need to recognize that too. And when they're working here in the United States, they certainly need to treat the United States at least as good as they treat the Chinese companies with which they interact.
The tech company is allegedly working to develop a search engine for the Chinese government. A teen who was once homeless is seeing his hard work pay off. Dylan Chittick getting accepted into 17 colleges. Look at that, including one of his top choices, Rowan University. Chittick is an honors student and president of his class at his New Jersey high school. He plans to study political science and go to law school. Congrats to him. That's how it's done.
Bright future.
Yeah.
All right.
The right way.
All right, the country of New Zealand is on high alert on this Friday after the deadly terror attack overnight at those two mosques. U.S. Ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown, will join us live next.
All right, here we go. Fox News alert, 49 people killed and more than 20 injured in New Zealand, many seriously, after gunfire erupted stunningly in two mosques.
Police charging one man with murder overnight as the normally peaceful nation remains on high alert now.
Joining us right now by phone, U.S. Ambassador to New Zealand, Scott Brown. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. What can you tell us?
Well, Brian, and obviously the team, thank you. It's great to be on. Listen, 49 people dead, a bunch more in surgery and battling for their lives. This peaceful country, as you noted, is shocked, certainly, came out of left field earlier today on a Friday, and it's now Saturday morning at 1:17 a.m. and more to follow tomorrow. Obviously, they caught the guy, one of the guys. Maybe there's more. They're going to do the deep dive as we would do back home, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Back here at home, you've seen the changes after we've had terrorist attacks in similar situations and how that's changed our laws and changed security measures. Do you expect to see the same thing now in New Zealand?
it's hard to say. They've always been very diligent and vigilant on their terror. Even though they have a natural border, the ocean, they still know that there are a lot of things happening here, whether it's ISIS or human drug and child trafficking. So that they're on it. They work very hard at it. As a Five Eyes partner, they certainly have the ability to do it and do it well. And I've been very impressed with the response, the quick response of the police force and the Prime Minister's team. So there's more to follow, obviously, tomorrow, and we'll learn more about who this person was and what made what him and or them tick.
Ambassador, how would you describe the gun laws in New Zealand? How do they view guns? Does every home have one? Does almost anyone have one?
No, listen, it's about 1.4 million guns here. A lot of it's for a lot of farms. They have to deal with the natural issues that farms deal with. But I haven't noticed any particular threats with regard to guns. Will they revisit it? It's hard to say. It's an independent country. They'll do whatever they do.
Sure.
But right now, I think they're really focusing on, gathering the facts, making sure the families are safe and secure. And Steve, by the way, I'm sorry, you did the introduction, Steve, and I apologize.
That's okay, Ambassador.
We're only 14,000 kilometers away, so I apologize.
Indeed. Well, what we have heard so far from the authorities, Ambassador Brown, is that apparently none of these people who have been arrested were on any watch lists. But it looks like his Twitter had images of ammunition magazines with names scrawled across them in white marker, including the names of 2 mass shooters who targeted migrants and Muslims. So it sounds like there were clues out there, but, hindsight is always 20/20.
Well, listen, Steve, interesting conversation. My wife and I were talking about that very issue. Like, is there something more that a lot of the social media sites can do? Bang, there's some type of buzzwords or threats or photos that come up. Do they go to a different filter? I don't know, but we have free press, we have freedom of speech, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to balance the right to know and right to protect versus the right to have freedom of speech. So it's always a balancing act. As a former U.S. Senator, I remember that. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a real challenge moving forward.
Ambassador, it was always good to hear from you. I wish you under different circumstances. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Thanks. All right.
All right, coming up straight ahead.
U.S. Airlines scrambling to find replacements for the Boeing 737 MAX. As those jets remain grounded after the crash in Ethiopia, we are live at one of the busiest airports in our country. Next. We are getting our first look at one of the mangled black boxes from that doomed Ethiopian Airlines jet. It's being looked over right now in France. Boeing 737 MAX jets are now grounded after that deadly crash, leaving airlines scrambling to replace those jets. Jeff Flott from our sister network, Fox Business, joins us live from Chicago's Midway Airport with more on this. Jeff?
Midway, Ainsley, is home to Southwest Airlines, which is by far the biggest customer of the 737 MAX. And as you know, all those planes now on the ground. And Southwest yesterday, in the person of Gary Kelly, the CEO of Southwest, with a full-throated defense of this aircraft. I want to read you just a portion of what he sent out to Southwest customers, saying yesterday, and I quote him now, "Our experience with a MAX, along with other U.S. operators, has been phenomenal. We've operated over 40,000 flights in almost 90,000 hours. We've had absolutely no problems." Despite that, as we said, the planes remain on the ground. And it could be for as long as 3, perhaps 6 months, some have speculated. The president yesterday, President of the United States, saying that he hoped it would be over quickly, but it may not be so. And now some new information as well in terms of what happened in the cockpit and how this plane crashed. The Ethiopian plane crashed. A quote from the pilot said, "Break, break, request return home." And the plane was apparently oscillating up and down before it crashed and accelerating rapidly beyond what would be normal. So pieces of the puzzle all being put together along with that black box information, and we continue to watch it. Ainsley.
Gosh, the terror they must have felt. Thanks so much, Jeff. All right, Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Ainsley. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi jumping on board the left's so far failed push to lower the federal voting age from 18 down to 16.
Myself have always been for lowering the voting age to 16. I think it's really important to capture kids when they're in high school, when they're interested in all of this, when they're learning about government, to be able to vote.
So is this really a tactic for Democrats to get more people to vote, or what? Here with the debate, we've got Democratic strategist Jason Nichols and Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Gianno Caldwell, who joins us today from L.A. Good morning, guys.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Jason, let's start with you. Tell us why 16-year-olds should be able to vote in federal elections.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that 16-year-olds in many states can buy guns, they can marry, they can lease apartments, they can drive vehicles. We give them lots of responsibilities. Why we wouldn't allow them to vote when they can work and pay taxes and do many of the things that many other adults do under certain circumstances. So it makes sense. And also, there are many countries, particularly in Latin America, that allow for 16-year-olds to vote, and it works for them. Why we wouldn't want more people involved in voting, to me, doesn't make very much sense at all.
Well, then why even have a voting age? Just whoever shows up could just vote. Hey, my 4-year-old's next. I'm being facetious. I'm being facetious. Gianno, what do you think of Jason's argument?
First and foremost, I'm not familiar with any 16-year-olds that are able to marry or rent apartments. Sorry, Jason, that argument doesn't hold water in my view. The truth of the matter is,
if you're an emancipated 16-year-old, you can do that.
If you're emancipated, very few are. Looney Tunes has become one of the favorite programs of 16-year-olds, and Looney Tunes is what the Democratic Party has become, especially with a measure which you know is used to get more power, as you know they usually do. The fact of the matter is the voting age was lowered only after Eisenhower said that, hey, if these folks are old enough to fight at 18, they should be old enough to vote. And then there was a Voting Rights Act of 1965 in which Nixon signed into law, which the Supreme Court then declared unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court was ratified with the 26th Amendment, giving that right. I think there's a difference between folks that are willing to put their lives on the line for our country and vote and have that 18-year-old provision than those who still need help from mom when they're being told to brush their teeth, and that's 16-years. So I don't think we should do this.
All right, so Jason, let me ask you this. Some critics of this plan have suggested this is just another way that the Democratic Party are trying to get more voters aligned with them.
Well, no, I disagree. I think this is a way of expanding our democracy. I think if Republicans want to challenge for 16-year-old votes, then they should go out and try to recruit 16-year-olds to join the Republican Party. These are open-minded young people. Young people, as we know, are usually much more open-minded than older people. And if the Republicans want to challenge for those votes, instead of always suppressing votes, whether it's young people, whether it's people of color, they need to go out and actually try to recruit new voters.
Gianno, you get the final word.
Well, the fact of the matter is we do have 16-year-olds within our party, and those 16-year-olds realize that they need to be 18 in order to vote. Those folks don't have personal responsibility at that particular point, and the sanctity of our vote should be something that we're cherished. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to vote, not something we should throw around to anybody who desires it.
All right. Well, let's see what happens. Jason and Gianno, thank you very much.
Voting's a right. It's not a privilege.
It is a right. You're absolutely right. All right. Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, thank you. All right, straight ahead on this Friday, Brian going one-on-one with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the State Department. What the Secretary is saying about threats like North Korea, China, and the border. The exclusive interview you're not going to see anywhere else is coming up next. Plus, Beto O'Rourke spent nearly 6 years as a U.S. congressman, so what did he accomplish? Some Democrats are struggling to answer. Ed Henry is here with your reaction coming up. Fire erupts inside 2 mosques in New Zealand.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo reacting to the attack moments ago, tweeting this out. Quote, my condolences to the grieving families of the victims in Christchurch, New Zealand. No one should have to fear such violence in their place of worship. The American people mourn this tragedy together with our friends in New Zealand.
When you're Secretary of State, you expect a lot of hot spots. Not many people look at New Zealand as something potentially be a hot spot.
Normally safe.
Yeah, it's usually one of the most characterized, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Very serene with great rugby. This was an all-out brawl. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State yesterday gave us some quality time in the afternoon to go over the hot spots and the hot issues breaking around the country, beginning with the first rocket attack in Israel in quite a long time. Here's that interview. Mr. Secretary, great to see you.
Brian, it's great to be with you.
The first time since 2014, if my stats are correct, the rockets came out of Gaza into Israel.
The Israelis have the right to defend themselves. I'm confident that they will be able to do that. I regret that the folks in the Gaza Strip, probably Hamas, although I suppose we shouldn't speculate, fire these rockets and put Israelis at risk. Right. This only presents an increased risk of escalation, something that we hope doesn't happen, but you should know we will support the Israelis' right to defend themselves.
Do you worry how much the anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic language coming out, mostly the Democratic side in Congress, hurts long-term the Israeli-American relations?
I do. I worried about it for multiple reasons, not just the relationship between these two democracies, but I worry about it because it undermines what we began today, Brian, the protection of the dignity and rights and the religious freedom of every human being. And so when I hear anti-Semitic remarks, it saddens me, and I know it undermines what is the greatest about the United States of America.
Seeing you and the president walk away in Hanoi, you do a great job keeping a poker face. But as the president spoke and talked about the deal you weren't going to have, do you feel personally that you let him down?
I don't. I think we made real progress, even in Hanoi, even a place where we didn't reach the final resolution of what we've been asking for all along. We didn't get an agreement for the full and final denuclearization in a verified way. This is a long process. The president's always said if we can keep missiles from flying and keep nuclear tests from happening, that's a good first start. We know what the final objective is.
It looks like the president and President Xi, if they are to meet at Mar-a-Lago, it's not going to happen until at the earliest mid-April. What's going on here?
So real progress has been made. I think that's absolutely true. I think both leaders want to make sure that we've had enough progress so that the two seniors, President Xi and President Trump, can get together and close out any of the remaining items. Whether it's the beginning of April, the middle of April, or if it even takes a couple of weeks longer, we ought to get this right. And I'm very hopeful that the two leaders can come together to get a trade deal that will benefit not only America, but the rest of the world as well.
So your message to the Venezuelan people, how much more garbage do they have to eat before America gets more directly involved?
Boy, when I think about how bad it is today and what I know it's going to be like tomorrow and the day after that, it's going to get worse. The Maduro regime is truly evil, denying food to the hungry, denying medicine to the sick. We've delivered. The American people have been so generous, 200 metric tons of food on their borders they won't let in. We are continuing to take efforts.
Have we put troops into Colombia ready to act should they need to act?
It's a fine question, and I'll let the Department of Defense talk about their movements of their
So you're passing
soldiers.
the question?
I am, yes.
I understand you're making a trip to the Middle East. Iraq and Iran meeting, forging relationships. Iraq's ignoring the sanctions, and Grand Ayatollah Sistani sat down with the president of Iran. It seems like in terms of soft power and diplomatic power, we're getting our butts kicked over there. What's happening?
Yeah, I don't see it that way. America has been a strong supporter of Iraq. We still are working to take down ISIS in their country. I had a conversation with their prime minister just a couple days back. I think we're making progress on developing a strong, independent, sovereign Iraq, but there's no doubt Iran has its eyes set on taking control of that country. I don't think that's good for the Iraqi people. I know it's not good for the United States of America, and we're going to continue to do the CT fight there and stand up an Iraqi government that's free and less involved with what's going on in Iraq.
Is it true that members of the Taliban 5, that what the previous administration let out of Gitmo, they are part of these peace talks right now, the ones that we exchanged for Bo Bergdahl, many of which described the worst of the worst? Is that true?
Brian, I don't want to answer who's been showing up there. I will say this.
Is that acceptable if they are?
I'll say this. We've negotiated with some really bad people. State Department doesn't often get to choose exactly who it is. We're trying to achieve good security outcomes for the American people. Sometimes we end up talking to some really bad folks.
And they would be okay to stay in that room with, as far as you're concerned?
If we can deliver security for the American people, we'll talk to just about anyone.
Before I came in here, it became clear that Republicans have jumped ship and decided to not vote with a piece of legislation that does not go along with the president's need for emergency money at the border. Do you side with the 59 that voted against the president, or do you side with the 41 that voted with him?
Count me in the 41.
Why?
I've spent a lot of time with my Mexican counterparts. This challenge at our southern border is real. I believe it's a crisis, but call it what you will. The challenge of not knowing who's coming in and out of our country and what drugs or people or illicit materials might be coming across our southern border is real. We need to take serious action against it, and the president's executive order does just that.
Your predecessor famously basically admitted that he called the president a moron. You have a much different relationship with him. What does he not get that you get?
My relationship with the president is one that's an effort on my part to execute his vision for America's foreign policy. He's the commander-in-chief. He provides the direction. I go out every day and work my tail off to try and execute it and implement it for him.
So a story on you today that talked about why is the Secretary of State doing so much traveling in the country from Iowa to Texas to Kansas? Is he running for president? Is he running for Senate?
I suppose everybody gets unhappy when I don't go to Martha's Vineyard like my predecessors did. They travel domestically too. America's our first client, and I wanted to go out to Iowa to talk about China and trade and why it matters. I went to Texas this week to talk about energy and how American innovation and creativity have created enormous wealth for America. And I'm going back to Kansas next week to talk about entrepreneurship. I'm doing this on behalf of America. I'm very focused on what I'm doing here today.
Are you ruling out running for the Senate in Kansas?
I have. I've told folks I'm not going to do that.
Long term, would I be surprised in 2024 if you're running for president?
I don't know if you'd be, but my wife would be shocked.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
A great interview.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks. I also, there's the whole thing's going to be online. It's 19 minutes. And on North Korea, there were some reports that, judging by his body language, that they were moving missiles into place before the Hanoi summit. So how sincere were they on possibly getting peace if they were moving missiles before? Right. And he would not confirm that.
Well, the stories were that they were so far apart even before the summit, but the president felt like he could, with his personal relationship with Kim, get some sort of a deal, but as we know, that didn't happen.
And now that story is accelerating further. Meanwhile, the whole thing's online shortly, probably in about a half hour. Meanwhile, Jillian, your first story is on North Korea.
That's right, it is. So let's stick with North Korea and get you caught up on that. North Korea says the U.S. blew a golden opportunity during the Hanoi talks that you guys were just referencing. The rogue regime says they are now considering resuming nuclear missile testing. Kim Jong-un is set to make an official announcement soon on whether to continue denuclearization talks with President Trump. The threat to suspend negotiations comes after satellite images showed North Korea rebuilding a missile test site. So we will keep you updated on that. A fundraiser for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was hosted by a mom charged in that massive college admission scheme just days before the scandal surfaced. Jane Buckingham co-hosting the event at a home in Los Angeles to fund the Democrats' 2020 presidential run. Meanwhile, actress Lori Loughlin has been dropped from the TV show Fuller House and Hallmark Channel. That's according to TMZ. It's time to stop playing the national anthem at sporting events. That is, according to a USA Today opinion column. Nancy Armour writing in part, quote, the kind of faux display of national pride better suited for countries run by dictators or despots. Armour adding that playing the anthem at games is a, quote, lazy excuse of patriotism. Retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician Joey Jones lost both legs in Afghanistan, and he's got a message for her. Listen.
There are men and women that lost their lives for this. One thing I would say to her is that when I'm at one of those sporting events, it means something to me. When Gold Star moms and dads are at those events, it means something to them. And for that reason alone, it's worth something that we should continue to do.
We're also making the point that since Colin Kaepernick started kneeling, the anthem has become a, quote, patriotic litmus test. Upsetting a lot of people with that opinion column.
They're not going to end it.
Yep.
Well, she brought up some good points of how we can improve how we treat the military. But we were wondering why you can't have both. Have it all.
There you go. All right, Jillian, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Beto O'Rourke spent nearly 6 years as a congressman. So what did he accomplish?
Joe brought a great deal of vitality to Congress. One of the issues in his, as I haven't been asked this question, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure she'd have a better answer today. Ed Henry here live to react, and he'll probably be smiling just like that. Plus, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders bringing Democrats further to the left. Now, one op-ed is sounding the alarm. Socialism, question mark? Yes, be afraid, exclamation point, close quotes. The author joins us live, period.
Beto O'Rourke officially launching his 2020 presidential bid in Iowa.
But some Democrats seem to be having trouble listing any of the former Texas congressman's accomplishments. I'll pause.
What, in your view, was Beto O'Rourke's signature accomplishment as a member of the House?
Beto brought a great deal of vitality to Congress. One of the issues in his, as I haven't been asked this question, but I just know of his record here.
So what was his record? Henry, national correspondent, joins. She should have remembered.
He's the speaker.
He's the guy, Beto O'Rourke's the guy who got somebody's name on a courthouse.
Yeah, all right. At least list that, or a post office or something. Look, in all seriousness, I was filling in for Martha last night. We had the chairman of the Texas Democratic Party on to talk up Beto O'Rourke. And first question, we played that bite from Nancy Pelosi, and I said, she mentioned vitality. I didn't know that was an accomplishment, but he brings vitality. We always hear, oh, he came close to winning a Senate seat, too. That's his other big... I said, could you name one accomplishment? And he struggled for a while. And I said, but just one. He said, well, he can't get anything done in Congress because Republicans were running it. And I said, I'm not even asking him about Congress, just in his life. So take a listen how it went out.
I think show the people of Texas and now the people of America what it means to be an honest politician.
But you're telling me he's an honest politician. That's his biggest accomplishment?
Yeah. How could he get anything done in a Congress that would not allow anybody, including themselves, to do anything? So,
okay.
Well, you know, your question is meaningless under the circumstances, sir.
I was baffled. It wasn't a trick question. And if you want to be president of the United States, Democrat or Republican, bring something to the table.
Legislation. It doesn't have to pass.
Yeah,
just
and I repeatedly said, I get he was a backbencher. In fairness, if you're a Democrat or Republican or a newcomer, it takes time.
That bill to get someone's name on the courthouse, that's the only thing he sponsored or co-sponsored when he was...
But what about in your life? Your business record beforehand? Sure. Again, I'm not trying to be
When he was on the town council in El Paso, what about that?
Well, he mentioned the town council. I said, name something from there. And he said, oh, he did all kinds of things. And you could watch it online. He couldn't name one thing. He got mad and he said, you know, he lashed out at me and said, you people. I said, I'm surprised. I wouldn't use a phrase like that, sir. This is the chair of the Democratic Party in Texas.
Well, listen, 14 other Democrats are going to be asking the same thing.
And you better have an answer before we have all these debates and all the rest.
Are you going to be on this weekend?
I'm filling in today for Dana at 2 p.m. Please be there. And then I will be on this couch all weekend with my buddy Pete.
Don't break anything.
Terrific. Thank you,
We'll be
Ed.
watching it. Thanks.
All right. Meanwhile, as the field of Democrats running for president grows, our next guest has a warning about some of their policies. They're socialist, and you should be afraid, he says.
But first, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to find out if Sandra Smith has planned anything for the next 3 hours when we're done. Sandra, anything?
Good morning, Brian, and great interview with Secretary Pompeo this morning. We'll have more on that coming up. And the latest on the terror attack in New Zealand, at least 49 people killed, many more injured, 4 suspects in custody. Mercedes Schlapp will join us live from the White House with reaction. Plus, what we're learning about Israeli airstrikes on terror sites in Gaza. Ambassador Danny Danon will join us on that. And President Trump heading to the Pentagon this morning for a meeting with national security officials. Congressman Pete King, Matt Thornberry, Senator John Barrasso, and more join us live from America's Newsroom. Happy Friday, everybody. We'll see you at the top of the hour.
Democrats rushing even further to the left ahead of 2020, touting socialist pieces like free college and health care for all. Our next guest sounding the alarm in a new op-ed titled Socialism? Yes. Be afraid. Here to explain is deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page and Fox News contributor, Dan Henninger. Dan, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you, Angela.
Why do you think that? Why be very afraid of socialism?
Well, I think it's because you just look at what is happening with the Democratic Party, and suddenly a freshman Democrat, Ocasio-Cortez, has become a superstar. Bernie Sanders did very well in most of the polling 4 years ago, and as well as Elizabeth Warren. And I think all of them have managed to move the entire party left. I mean, all of the candidates running for the presidency are now adopting these views. Even John Hickenlooper, the former moderate governor of Colorado, asked if he's a capitalist, said, well, that's not the first label I would use. And what I am suggesting is that if one of them gets elected, that presidency, I think, will be to the left of Barack Obama's presidency, which was the most left-wing presidency in the entire period after World War II.
Yeah, they're more in line with Bernie Sanders now.
Absolutely.
Will you break down Elizabeth Warren's proposed act? It's called the Accountable Capitalism Act.
Yeah, this is a proposal she has, and she has some specific ideas, such as large firms, large corporations should have to apply for a federal charter. And what I am suggesting here is that at this federal charter, it would be under a President Warren, that they would be expected to comply with certain environmental, social justice goals of the Democratic Party. It was like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez beating up on the CEO of Wells Fargo this week in the hearing, saying, you should have liability for damage done by people to whom you lend money, such as environmental damage. That is basically incorporating the private sector into their agenda, saying, we own you, we're going to tell you what to do. Warren's Act would also allow workers to appoint 40% of the members of a corporation's board and then require them to get majority board votes for anything they wanted to do in the political realm. Such as that. In other words, we want you to sort of adopt our agenda, our political goals. And I'm calling that socialism American style. They don't own these companies, but they administer the way they conduct their policies.
All right, Dan, thank you so much for breaking this down for us.
All right,
have a good weekend. We have more Fox and Friends just moments away.
But a mostly sunny week.
Right.
There you go.
Now you'll go another week on the bestseller list.
Oh,
Can you do it?
I hope so. You can do it. We're talking about a book tour as well.
Oh, really?
Tweet me the cities you want me to come see you in.
And go buy Mostly Sunny.
That's right.
Great book.
After the show available exclusively on FoxNation.com. See you next Monday.
Bye.
Happy Friday.
Hey guys, thank you. Good morning.